Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. One of my favorite parts of doing this show is that I get to interview really interesting people that ordinarily I would probably never have a chance to cross paths with, but because I have a show and I reach an audience and I get to meet kind of neat people, I get connections, and here we go. So my guest today is a guy named Kevin Trudeau, who has a fascinating story, and he'll be telling his story at the beginning of the interview. But so he's a guy that had these very unique abilities when he was younger, very unique DNA, which we'll explain more in the show. Anyway, he ended up being invited into a very high-level secret society called the Brotherhood, where he was, bumping elbows with Henry Kissinger and world leaders and, Gorbachev and a lot of interesting people, to say the least. And he then saw the plans of this society and the control they had and what their kind of views were over, kind of the simpletons, you and I, the cattle, and didn't like it. And so decided to leave this society and expose a lot of what their plans were. Now, as he'll explain in the interview, he did a few things to make sure that we weren't just going to disappear him and kill him, which is very common. But he also knew that he was going to be stepping into a path of a lot of treachery. So he ended up being targeted by different agencies. He spent over a decade in prison. I mean, he went through hell. But he's also become very successful, and he's had a lot of success in his life, which has enabled him to reach a lot of people. So in this discussion, we're going to be getting into secret societies and bloodlines, but also into hidden knowledge and the past human history, into the views of these kind of elite secret societies and how they look at people, what their end goal is, how to fight back against it. It's just going to be a fun discussion. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. So please enjoy the show with Kevin Trudeau. Mr. Kevin Trudeau, it is great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
So glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you have a very interesting background, and I think that I would not do it service to try to introduce you. So I'll let you just give the quick, or I guess take as long as you want to, but tell us kind of a little bit of your background and what brings you to where you are here today.
Well, most people know me today, I think, as a #1 New York Times bestselling author. I've published 6 books. I've sold over 100 million copies of those books. My biggest book was called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About, which was #1 on the New York Times list 26 weeks in a row. It was actually the best-selling book in all of America the year it came out. That one book sold over 50 million copies. Back in the day, people knew me as the infomercial king back in the 90s because I was on TV every day with all the TV infomercials. And back in the 70s, most people aren't that old, but I was known as the #1 copywriter in the world. I wrote all these direct mail pieces and was a top copywriting expert. And I own 3 TV networks in Europe. I built a multi-billion-dollar enterprise around the world. But because I was exposing the corruption in the United States government and the FDA and the FTC, I was persecuted and prosecuted. And most people know me as the guy who's been attacked by the government for exposing what they don't want you to know about. Primarily the drug companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the food industry, and so forth. And I got held in contempt of court because I refused to stop exposing what I knew from behind the curtain. And I got the longest sentence in the history of America, 10 years in federal prison for the non-crime of contempt of court, which contempt of court is not a felony. It's not even a misdemeanor. It's called, I think the pronunciation in Latin is surriguriitis, which means a thing of its own. So most people know me as this controversial guy. The government calls me a snake oil salesman and a scammer. But the hundreds of millions of people that have purchased my books, as far back as Mega Memory, How to Improve Your Memory, they continue to be benefited by the material that I've presented. And people know the truth. They know that I've been exposing things that the government doesn't want you to know about. Therefore, they use their standard MO, which is first, discredit the person. Just call them all types of names and discredit them, although they're frivolous claims. They just try to discredit. They use the media, which is in their back pocket, to do that discrediting. If that doesn't work, they try to wipe you out financially. They get banks to close your accounts, merchant processors to close your accounts, so you can't operate in business. And if that doesn't work, they shut you up by throwing you in prison. I mean, this is the MO that the government uses all the time. And they did it to many, many people, just not me. We see the weaponization of the Justice Department and the various government agencies. Heck, when you go back to the Nixon tapes, when Nixon was saying against his political opponents, he said, what agency should we use to go after him? Well, we always use the IRS. Why don't we use somebody else? And he goes, well, he has some boats. Let's use the EPA or something, and we'll get him for, using the wrong paint, and we'll get him put in prison for some crime. I mean, you hear it right on the Nixon tapes, how the government politicians are using the agencies as weapons against either a political opponent, a business opponent, so they can wipe out competition, so that their friends, relatives, and donors can make money, or if somebody's exposing something that they don't want exposed, and they use that as a weapon. So, yeah, you can say I have a colorful background, a controversial background. Someone called me the most interesting man in the world, and I've been in palaces, I've been with kings and prime ministers, presidents, and also in federal prison for contempt of court. So there's a great dichotomy here of being treated by the king in the presidential palace and treated like a king by the king, and then being in prison for contempt of court for exposing what the U.S. government doesn't want you to know about.
Absolutely crazy. I'm trying to think of where to start, because I've got about 10 different topics I want to hit with you just based upon that introduction. But I tend to, I like taking that big picture view, or you could also say I like just digging deep into things. And so where my mind is going is, obviously you're someone that achieved extraordinary success. The success that most Americans can only dream of, right? Selling, even if you made $100 off each book you sold, that's a lot of revenue just from book sales. But that was just only one part of what you did. But it seems like that from very early on, though, that you were really pretty much hell bent on exposing the corruption that you were seeing. And I find that, I feel almost lucky. I've grown and I've got a good large audience, but I'm not like one of the big guys, right? So I can talk about things and expose things, and I kind of, for the most part, knock on wood, go unnoticed. But once you reach a certain level, a certain, I guess, realm of power, if you're not controlled and owned by them, you're going to have a hard time. And you see it playing out in Hollywood, you see it playing out in politics, you see it everywhere. There's a club. And if you're not going to join that club and do whatever they tell you to do, they're not just going to say you can't come in, they're going to ruin you. And so what is it that, what did you see about how society works and how marketing works, and how did you see this, peer into this window and see so long ago the truth about the government that now a lot of people are only seeing in the past, say, 5 years or so? What is it that opened your eyes to that? Because it seems like that you've got from an early age, you saw something most people didn't see.
Yeah, I have a Rumble show as well, and it's called Kevin Trudeau Limitless. But there was a documentary being filmed about me as well called KT Confidential. And it took a long time for the producers to get me to kind of sit and reveal some of the things that I've known. Some says, you're almost like a Raymond Reddington. You have this, you're involved in this shadow government. Back when I was very, very young, I was born with the ability to see energy, to move energy. You could call it psychic or clairvoyant abilities. And look, a lot of people have that. A lot of people are skeptical of that. But at the end of the day, we know remote viewing has been studied and worked with the U.S. government. I was involved in that program, as well as when I was with President Gorbachev, who was a good friend of mine. They did it at the KGB as well in Russia, and they do it in China, all over the world. So there's a lot of this which the government doesn't want you to know about. There was a good movie, Men Who Stare at Goats. I don't know if you remember that, where it was loosely based on true facts about the ability to use your mind to actually stop the heart of a goat. That was the reason that Men Who Stare at Goats, and they could kill the goat just by psychically throwing energy. And you can train your mind to do that. But because of my natural abilities that I was born with, to be able to see things and collapse time and so forth, I was brought into an organization called the Brotherhood, which is a secret society. Now, look, secret societies ain't so secret, are they? Because we know about the Bilderberg Group It's a secret, but we know it exists. There's films of it, etc. We know about Yale University's Skull and Bones. I mean, there's a building there. People admit that they're members of Skull and Bones, and they have their own island, Skull and Bones Island. I've been there. I remember George Bush in his book said, when I was at Yale, I got tapped on the shoulder to join a secret society called Skull and Bones, a society so secret, that's all I can say about it. And John Kerry was a member, and many Supreme Court justices, and the founder of the CIA was a member of Skull and Bones. So we know that there's a lot of secret societies, but the real secret society, called the Brotherhood, is a real secret. I mean, we don't have buildings. It's a completely shadow. It's completely in the shadows, completely unknown, because it is a secret. The people that are involved in the Brotherhood, some of them are members of these other more public secret societies. But this group is really what controls the politicians. They control the corporations. They control everything. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, you name the global group, it's involved in manipulating everything on the planet. I was in that group. One of the things that they did in that group was take people with abilities like myself and trained us how to maximize those abilities, to increase our capability of using those, powers. Some people say, oh, it sounds like X-Men, or there was a TV show called The Pretender where he was brought into the center. And I says, well, that's loosely based on my story because it was 1963, and that's what they mentioned in 1963. That's when I was born. Again, loosely. But in that group, I was trained very effectively on how to be used as a tool around the world. And that's why I mentioned I was in presidential palaces. And even recently, royalty calls me when they have questions. They want me to see into the field, see into the energy, and so forth. In that group, the idea was we're trying to better society. Well, the method being used to better society really is to better themselves and increase their power and control. And there's arguments about whether it's bettering society. Look, today, there is less poverty in the world today than ever before in history. There's less people starving. There's less people dying of malnutrition. There's less people dying of disease than ever before in history. You could say society is better. There's a lot of better things today than there were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago. And there's a lot of problems too, but you could argue that it's getting better. Okay, that's a debate. The bottom line was I felt that the methods were not good. One of the things that specifically went against my morals and ethics was hiding the truth about a person's real natural capabilities, what their mind is capable of doing. And not only hiding that truth, but doing things to suppress a person's ability, such as putting fluoride in the drinking water, such as massively increasing the amount of sounds that a person's hearing every day and beeping, beep, 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 everything beeps. There's a reason for that. It numbs the brain down. The social media, everything designed to click and get a new neural pathway and release serotonin. All these different methods, the amount of drug consumption, drugs, as we know, suppress a person. Soy increases estrogen in men, reduces testosterone, making them more docile, which is why we have this massive low testosterone issues in America and growing around the world. Throughout history, people have done things in power to suppress the masses. The British made sure all the Chinese were on opium. Okay, let's keep them very docile. Keep them on opium. So those are the things I didn't like. And then I left the Brotherhood. I was the first person ever to actually leave the Brotherhood. And I was told that my life was not going to be a pleasant one if I left, because they control everything. They control the courts, they control judges, they control prosecutors, they control all types of things. The media, massively.
Do you want to know what the future holds? Just watch what the elites are doing. They're not piling into tech stocks or chasing crypto bubbles. They're buying gold, silver, land, and they're building bunkers. Why? because they know that the reset's coming and paper and digital assets won't survive it. That's why I follow their lead. But I don't wait until the crowd catches on. I already hold metals that I can touch. There's no passwords, no middlemen, no permission slips. Because when the system resets, those metals will still have value. So here's the question. Do you want to be one of the ones scrambling for scraps or the one holding what everyone else needs? See yourself in that moment and choose your role now. Go to goldwithseth.com and request your free guide or call Noble Gold at 877-646-5347. The people who act before the headlines are the ones who own the future. Again, that's goldwithseth.com or 877-646-5347.
And when I left and started exposing this, the proverbial, crap hit the fan. And I knew it was coming, and it was the life I chose. It was like, look, this is the decision I made because I thought that exposing what they're doing would awaken people, take people out of their trance, and give a certain small group of people that actually want to help themselves the ability to. And I remember Gorbachev and Henry Kissinger telling me, because they were two good friends of mine, they were in the Brotherhood, and they said, Kevin, why do you want to do this? It's like you're trying to make a pig sing. You're going to waste your time and annoy the pig. Don't do it, because you're trying to teach people that are not teachable. They're not going to come out of their trance. They're going to loathe you. They're going to have contempt for you. They're going to resist you. They're going to say bad things about you. They're not going to buy into what you're saying. They're going to say scammer, scammer, scammer. And I said, look, there's going to be some people that are going to hear what I'm saying, are going to wake up, see the truth, and they're going to produce a life. They're going to create a life for themselves that's beyond their wildest imagination. And I got virtually thousands and thousands of letters and emails and telegram messages from people all over the world that have bought in. Maybe they read the book Natural Cures and learned about, the natural cures to cure and prevent disease without drugs and surgery, and their health got better, or they went through my course, Your Wish is Your Command, which I have a brand new book that came out, and they're on that subject where they're learning beyond the law of attraction and how to use the brain. Maybe they're going through my Success Mastery course or Science of Personal Mastery course that is the exact training I got in the Brotherhood, so they can learn how to use their brain and focus and actually see into the field and create and manifest what they want in their life, and their life's going to get better. So I have that. And I said, look, yes, I'm getting all the flack, but there's an old saying, when you're over the target when you're getting flack. So I think I know I'm over the target.
Oh, it sounds like it. These kinds of secret societies, from my own research in them, are very, very driven by bloodlines. And that's where also you get into the satanic ritual abuse, and you have the raising up of the next, Project Monarch, and a lot of the different things that they've done. So were you from a particular bloodline that opened these doors, or how was it that you even were made aware that this even existed, let alone were invited into it?
Yeah, in the secret societies, it's based on bloodline primarily. 95%, I'd say, in the 90s. Maybe it's 92, maybe it's 98, but it's in the 90% are from a particular bloodline. And there's a reason for that. You've heard many wealthy people, Donald Trump specifically, says success is in the genes. He always says it's in the genes. And if you go back to the movie Titanic, where the wealthy people were in the first class dining room, where only first class people could eat, they talked about it's in the genes. And if you go back to the Kennedys, remember Rosemary, one of the daughters, was crazy, and she had to get a phlebotomy and was put into a mental institution. And this was suppressed because that meant that the crazy gene was in all the Kennedys, and they didn't want that revealed. If you had somebody in your family that was a criminal, it was horrific, because that means in your family blood, in your DNA, you could have the criminality gene. That was the prevailing theory back for thousands of years. It was always the prevailing theory. What family do you come from? Do you come from a good family? Do you come from a bad family, an intelligent family, an athletic, because this is going to determine who you are, not just physical attributes, but also mental and emotional attributes as well. So this is why in the secret societies, it comes from a bloodline, because in those bloodlines, you don't have counterintention. In the DNA, researchers now have proven what we've talked about for hundreds of years in our societies. That is, if somebody in your lineage, somebody in your ancestors made a postulate, made a decision, or had a trauma, it's in their DNA. And that means it's potentially in yours and it can activate. So if somebody has a trauma such as they lose all their money and they're saying, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, because they had that trauma, it's in their DNA, and that means it could be in yours too. So you could have a counterintention coming from your DNA. If you come from a wealthy family, you have a wealth vibration in your DNA. It's not a counterintention to money. If your parents or grandparents or somebody in your ancestors was very religious and they pounded, money is the root of all evil, rich people don't go to heaven. Well, that's in your DNA, and you have a counterintention. So when you're trying to make money, you're going to have this counter vibrational frequency going against you subconsciously. You don't even know it exists. So we have these various things, which is why bloodlines are who determines who gets in the secret society, with an exception. And that exception is the albino. That is, this the white heifer, right? Every once in a while, there's like, this is some anomaly. And in my case, I was an anomaly because my mom and dad were not rich, and my ancestors from Italy and Europe were not rich. I had a lot of counterintentions in my DNA, but there was an anomaly there as well. And there is an anomaly. I actually had my DNA tested at Rutgers University. They run 3,600 markers, which is more markers than any place else in the world. Most give about 100 markers. They give 3,600. And there's some anomalies there that the researchers said, we've never seen this before. So there are some anomalies that were in my DNA, which allowed me to do some specific things. And this is why I was, quote, recruited into this society. And it was very interesting because when I saw the movie, I think it was the very first episode of Star Wars, not the first one that came out, but episode 1, where little Anakin Skywalker has something in his blood. They go, I've never seen anybody with so many, crypto-spuridians or whatever, in the blood. I kind of laugh because it was very similar to my experience as well when they're saying, listen, we shouldn't allow this guy in because he's not from the right bloodline, but, and he may cause a problem. But he's got this ability, he's got this anomaly, we can use him. Well, I did cause a problem for them, ultimately. So the ones who said I shouldn't be in maybe were right. I did a lot of work for them, obviously, but I did obviously leave, and now I'm kind of revealing what I'd learned about how things actually operate from behind the scenes. Not just natural cures or how to manifest goals, dreams, and desires, but also I learned a lot about business, how to start businesses, how to be more efficient, how to get more done in less time, how to get people to accomplish more for you if you're in a leadership position. There's a lot of things that I learned in that organization that I didn't know, and I learned it. And I then used it in my life to create billions and billions of dollars in revenue. I own 3 TV networks in the UK, all without raising any money. I did it all out of cash flow. I mean, I just pyramided profits, and it's quite extraordinary when you actually look at it. But to me, it was not extraordinary at all. It's like I was given the tools. I learned how to use these tools in that society. And then when I actually did it, it produced the results.
And so did you, when you went through that process of kind of stepping aside or in making that choice to leave, I know that some of these societies, it's, there's really no option to leave, and it's kind of a blood oath. And if you leave, then you're going to end up, being found with a gun, you somehow committed suicide with 2 guns in the back of your head type story, right? So after you had chosen to left, and you mentioned even talking to Kissinger, right, having these conversations about this, which is, wild. But after you had chose to leave, were there any threats on your life? I mean, what was it that prevented them from just disappearing Kevin Trudeau?
It's a very good question. People have disappeared in many ways. If you see an accident, a plane goes down, well, there's one person on there, there's a good chance that they want it disappeared. Everybody else is just collateral damage. So there's a lot of accidents, not just one guy's car goes off a cliff. Okay, that's a little too obvious, right? But if he's on a plane and the plane goes down and everybody else dies, well, how do you pinpoint that they were after this one particular guy? The reason I left, because I wouldn't have, because I know that I would have been disappeared. The reason I left is I made sure before I left that I had a fail-safe. And that fail-safe meant if anything happened to me, everything was coming out. And so I set up, and it took many years to set up.
A dead man switch, right?
A global fail-safe system that's in place. And I let everybody know when I left. It wasn't a secret that when I decided to leave, it was an announcement. And I said, this is what I have, and this is what I'm doing, and leave me alone. And they said, well, we're not going to kill you, but we are going to silence you as best we can. And I know the MO. I know what you're going to do. And we all know. They said, yeah, we're going to discredit you first, try to wipe you out financially, put you in prison, and get you to silence. And the whole time we'll be making you offers to come back. I mean, it was, I wish this was on film. You know, it was like a very rational conversation. And, you know, we didn't shake hands, but the meeting ended. And then off I went, knowing what was to come.
Interesting. Obviously, you have felt such conviction in leaving that it was worth the risk and it was worth the hardship and the decade in prison. But here you are. So one thing you mentioned earlier, which I want to dig into a little more, I personally believe that the human mind and the human body, as we were created, is so much more powerful than any of us know. Any of your average people know. I think that I grew up and I had friends that I didn't have any special abilities as a kid. I was in like the enrichment programs, and I think I was pretty bright as a kid, but I was never bending spoons with my mind, or like what you see with Stranger Things, going into the Montauk experiment type stuff. It wasn't me. But I had friends that had those abilities that could look at a person, and one of my good friends, he could look at a woman and he could say, oh, she's pregnant. And he'd know whether it was a boy or a girl, and he might know before even she knew, because he could see what was happening on a soul level. Or he could see someone and he'd say, oh, one time he's looking, he's like, is your knee hurting you? And I was like, yeah, it's hurting. He's like, yeah, I can see there's all kinds of black matter around your knee. Things like that you have those experiences, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's real, right? But but my belief though is that a lot of these abilities are innate human abilities. It's actually how God created us. We have these abilities, but because we live in a realm that is in essence being ruled by the evil, and this is, we're in a realm that's kind of Satan is overseeing. And I think that I look at that as our challenge is to rise above that, right? To fight against that, to find the light in the world of darkness, that a lot of this information has been suppressed. I really believe even in the history of our humankind. I mean, we think that, from an early age, we're taught that we evolved from monkeys and sea creatures, and we're just these kind of soulless bags of meat walking around, kind of banging rocks together. Whereas I think that actually we've had multiple advanced civilizations, and we've had massive history that has been wiped from our memory. I think the Smithsonian has cleared away so much information that shows, yeah, there were actually giants that lived. There were all these things that you look as these, say, biblical fairy tales or these ancient Chinese kind of, the lore and the mythical stories, but that were actually real. And so I think that we are living in essence, in what you could call a prison planet. We're living in a place where the truth has been hidden from us so long and over so many generations that we don't know what we don't even know. And it's so deep. But I also think that, as you're echoing, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, that there is that layer of our society. They know these things. They know the information that's in the Vatican libraries. They know the truth. And they are keeping that from us because I think that my own belief is that they believe that they're this kind of more superior. They're the chosen ones, and we're just the cattle, and we're the useless eaters to them. And that's what drives a lot of their perspective. But what would you say? I guess, am I kind of in the same wavelength as you, or is that your own experience?
You're right on the money. And it's absolutely 100% true that the privileged elite class at the highest levels absolutely 100% believe, and this has been documented in documents and paper and written down and in speeches, they believe that they are superior and they are the ones who should be governing. And this is not a new philosophy. You go back to the ancient Vedas, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, or the Mahabharata, depending on how you pronounce it, in India, they had a caste system. So you had 4 castes. You had the peasant class, you had the merchant class, you had the warrior class, which were the rulers, and you had the Brahmins, which were the god class, the priests. They talked to God, and they controlled the warrior class or advised the warrior class. And the whole system was set up. It's like, look, the warrior class are big, strong, muscular guys. We're the ones who are going to protect society. We can't let the peasants be a leader. They don't have the brain. They don't have the intellect. It's not in their genes. And that's why they didn't intermarry outside of their class. So this has been going on throughout history. You go back, remember the movie Lawrence of Arabia? Lawrence of Arabia, based on a true story, Sir Lawrence, was in the First World War. The British basically controlled Arabia. The Arabs were just like the Native Americans. They were tribes, and they lived in not teepees, but tents. But it was very similar. Just like in America, you had all these Native Americans, we called them Indians, but Native Americans, tribes, and they were constantly fighting each other, right? They were constantly fighting. But they couldn't create a society, and they couldn't rule. They had their way of life. The Arabs were exactly the same way. And the British said, we, the British, because of our blood, the blue bloods, we will bring civilization to the planet because we're finding uncivilized people around the world who can't govern themselves, who are constantly killing each other, constantly fighting. They can't build a road system. They can't build a house. They have to live in a tent. Their brains are so small. This is what the British were saying, that we have to govern them. It's our duty because of our intellect, our brains, our mind, our blood. It's our duty to civilize the planet, and we will rule India. We will rule China. We will rule Arabia and bring civilization to the uncivilized, to the savages. That's what their idea was. It's not just the British. There are this class throughout the world that believes that they are superior to everyone else. However, everyone else has a lot of people. And so in order to make sure that you're in control, you have to do things to suppress the group. What was the first thing they always did? Make sure they're illiterate. The first thing the privileged elite class always did was make sure the masses couldn't read or write because they couldn't read the books. You need me. I'm the priest. I'm the leader. I can read the holy book. Let me read it to you. You can't read it. I can. And I'm not going to read you this because that gives you too much power. So that's how they controlled initially. Then they controlled them with food. They said, we're going to control all the food. You want to eat? Then you have to go into the field. Okay. Slavery has been around forever in that respect, but they didn't call it slavery. It was you were the peasant class. They controlled the land. So it was very similar. And then, of course, let's drug everybody. Let's get them on opium. Let's get them on peyote. Let's give them saltpeter. Remember the British used to give the soldiers saltpeter so their testosterone would go around. They couldn't get an erection, and therefore they had no drive, and they would just be docile, and they would follow orders. They're making them effective eunuchs so that these men would just blindly obey. So that was the whole plan. And again, I saw this firsthand. I saw it firsthand. And I said, this is wrong. People need to know the truth. They need to know what's being hidden from them in terms of their true power, that they are a spiritual being having a physical experience, that they have unlimited power. And yes, there are some restrictions based on our bodies and our brain. Yes, just like you're going to take a guy from Cambodia and saying, you're going to become a professional bodybuilder and win Mr. Olympia. No, he's not. Because in the genes, his body does not have the capability of building muscles that big. His bone structure is different. So yeah, we do have some limitations. But at the end of the day, everyone can be infinitely better and more powerful and more at cause over their environment than they are right now. And if you do that, you actually change your DNA, and then your offspring have a better chance. And you can spread that down through generations. And that's the reason why I left. I said, I can expose people to this. And if one person's life gets dramatically better or somewhat better, that's good. But more importantly, they now are on the right momentum cycle. And everyone who has their DNA, here's the beautiful thing about DNA. If your DNA changes today, everybody who has some of your DNA living right now, their DNA is changing too. So it doesn't mean, if you have children, if you already have children and you work on becoming a better you, more positive, more upbeat, you learn new things, you learn new skills, you start exercising your ability to create and manifest things in your life. Everybody that has some of your DNA gets benefit in addition to just yourself. You help everybody. And then those people, everyone they interact with and everybody you interact with who doesn't even have your DNA, they're affected by your energy field. So you're positively impacting everyone. And I saw this firsthand. This was the fear of the elites, of this happening, and then people basically understanding that they can be at cause over their environment. They can have pan-determinism, which means they can determine their entire future, their entire world, their entire reality. They can govern themselves. They have power. They have control. They don't have to blindly follow what the authorities say. This is scary to those in power and control right now. And that's why me doing what I was doing and am doing is such a threat to them.
When you walk through that, playbook of how to conquer, how to keep people subservient, how to prevent uprisings, you're describing, what could have been, say, a couple hundred years ago, right? The illiteracy, no one owned any land. They were subservient, weakened by drugs. It's like nothing's changed. Like you look at America, I look as kind of the modern day Babylon in many ways, and you can see that our testosterones are at very low levels, right? Men they're overweight, they're unhealthy. Even looking back, because I've been doing some research into like what mead used to be, right? Like the actual old way of actually consuming, brewed and fermented drinks and mead has completely been replaced by Bud Light in a plastic lined can, which we know is increasing estrogen. And they've taken away so much from us, but you see it's like rampant pornography, drug use, the legalization of marijuana. So now it's so easy for anybody, they can just pop some gummies and just kind of zone out and not worry about the things they should be doing. It's like they've done such a good job of creating this docile class where you look at even, when COVID came about and your average person, the men that should have been protecting their families and should have been fighting against the school systems were putting masks on the kids and, hey, you gotta go get your shot. You had to go to the school, so you had to go get your shot. And then a year later, the kid's having seizures. And it's like, oh, was that my fault? It's like, yeah, it was your fault as the parent that should have been protecting this child and researching every single thing going into their body. But that's what we're living in it, right? The bread and circuses of Rome. It's like when you've got NFL and your average guy that they know exactly who the leading quarterback is right now, but they don't know that the Federal Reserve isn't federal, right? It's like they've done such a good job. But you mentioned the elites fearing the uprising of the people, and so as much as I can complain about the state of the world today and how much we've been just completely just duped in so many ways and have been so suppressed. I'm also seeing, though, that there is this mass awakening happening. There's a mass rejection of big pharma. There is the greatest distrust in government and institutions I think that we've seen probably in the history of the country, right? And so do you see that, because you're seeing both levels, you're seeing the everyday people that you're speaking to and that you're helping and you're educating, but you also, I'm sure you still have certain windows and insights into what's happening at that kind of upper, kind of more elite level of society. Are you seeing that, I guess, I'll kind of frame the question concisely, that they're looking and they're saying that society is exactly where it needs to be and that, okay, hey, we've got them just, the cattle are kind of ripe for the slaughter? Or are you seeing that there's a worry that a lot of us are actually starting to break out of that spell and we're starting to realize our power? Like, what are you witnessing?
Well, there's a little bit of a worry, but at the same time, they still have a lot of tools in their toolbox that they haven't used yet.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a worry, but it's real simple. All we have to do is start a war, and then we get everybody controlled again. Or we have to have a pandemic, and we control everybody again. I mean, they have some tools that they've already tested that they know work beautifully, and they can pull that trigger anytime they want for control. But the real control is not about the money. It's not about the media. The real control is about your ability to feel like you have power versus you feeling powerless and helpless, and that you need the government and you need authority. So in our group, we had a very simple mission. The mission was, how do we make the people want control, want to be controlled, want more power and authority ruling them? How do we get them to want that, to fight for it, to demand it? It's very simple. I mean, you go back to what Hitler did, right? We would create this massive issue where people are afraid and then they give up their authority. Happened with 9/11. I mean, do you realize 9/11 happened and then immediately they signed the Patriot Act? Well, first off, that was a technique that I came up with. I said, let's call the bill something, which is completely different than what it really is. Because the Patriot Act could have been called the Suppress the U.S. Population Act. How to Control the U.S. Population Act, which is what it could be called, but they call it the Patriot Act. Who would vote against the Patriot Act, right? You're not patriotic? You're going to vote against the Patriot Act? Well, the Patriot Act was already written. They said, how do we get this passed? Well, one argument is, let's create a scenario where people demand that gets signed. And do you realize that document overrides the United States Constitution? In that document, it allows the U.S. government to take all of your money or your car or your house or anything without charging you with a crime, and you then have to sue to try to get it back. Nobody knows that. How many tens of billions of dollars has been confiscated under the Patriot Act, and poor people, because they happen to have some cash in their briefcase or in their backpack. You know, one guy took the money out of his bank. He was an immigrant, legally in the country, hardworking, right here in the Chicagoland area it happened. Hardworking landscaper. He goes, takes his money out because he didn't trust the bank because there was some bank closings going on. Takes his money out. He's got like 30 grand. This is whole life savings. Has it in his backpack. Was speeding, got stopped because he looked Mexican. They do a search. They find the 30 grand. They take it. They take the money. They don't charge him with anything because he was going not that far over the speed limit. They didn't even charge him with speeding. He got charged with nothing. They took the money, and then he has to then, where did you get it? It's my money. I earned it from landscaping. And he didn't have the money to pay it. It would cost him 150 grand in legal fees just to get the 30,000 back.
Let me ask you something. How much time do you spend every day clicking around online, searching, scrolling, juggling a dozen tabs? It eats up a lot of time. Well, there's a new AI-powered web browser from Perplexity called Comet, and it's completely changing how you use the internet. Comment doesn't just give you answers, it actually does things for you. It clicks, types, scrolls, and gets stuff done in real time, like booking flights, finding hotels, ordering food, even summarizing long articles or videos. Now, I'll be honest, I'm hesitant about AI overall, but I started using Comment as a way to get around censorship. For example, when I search on Google, does the government have weather modification projects? All I get are fact checkers, official statements, and the same tired conspiracy theory label. But when I ask Comment the same question, it actually pulls up the real documents, declassified government files, congressional reports, even weather control patents. Hard facts, not filtered spin. So if you could use a good tool that gives you extra help with online tasks while also arming you with information to prove to your friends that you're not as crazy as they think you are, this could be a great solution. So you can try Perplexity's new AI browser Comment by heading to pplx.ai/MIA. And when you download it, you're also going to get a free month of Rumble Premium. So that link is in the description below. Again, it's pplx.ai/MIA. So take back your time and take back the truth online.
So there are a lot of things, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. Another thing that I came up with when I was in the Brotherhood was we understood how the brain worked. So all we have to do is start stimulating the brain and put you virtually into a trance. So here's one of the things I said. Look, we control the media. Let's have a different method of making movies and TV shows. If you go back and watch some of the old movies back in the 60s, old TV shows, I Love Lucy, Perry Mason, whatever. Look at an old movie like Casablanca, Citizen Kane, and notice how many times the camera cuts to a different shot. So the camera is looking, and it's one frame, and the camera will move a little this way, move a little that way. There's 2 or 3 people in it all talking. You're seeing 2 or 3 people at the same time, and they're talking, and the camera doesn't cut. They're just shooting. Today, look how many times and how fast they cut. They go close up, close up, close up, close up, close up, boom, boom. It's constant. It's perfect. I put you into a trance, and guess what that makes you? That makes you susceptible to my command. It's beautiful. And then I said, why don't you just move the camera around? And then they came up with this crazy technique where the camera's moving, like it's a handheld camera where the guy's running and somebody's running after him in the cam. And that's beautiful because that's also going to get the brain to just go into this trance. And now the person is walking around virtually in a trance. And when authority says, stay inside, yes, I follow and obey. I was told to stay inside. I will stay inside. I will not leave the house. I mean, that's really, I'm exaggerating, of course, but the point is that's really what's happening. And now the other thing we're adding in is the beeping. You get your car today, everything beeps. Everything in your house beeps. You throw some laundry in. It beeps when you open the door. It beeps when you close the door. It beeps when you turn it on. It beeps when it's off. Everything beeps. The beep is so powerful. You go back to some of the old movies where they hypnotize people or whatever, the original Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra. Everything was based on a beep. Go look at the Naked Gun. One of the original Naked Guns with Leslie Nielsen, the original ones. It was a beep, 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 and all of a sudden the person becomes an assassin. The beep, the magic beep. That's why everything beeps today. And there's a lot of other tools. Let's just put fluoride in the drinking water. That'll basically suppress you. Oh, what else can we do? Let's put soy in everything because soy will increase estrogen, reduce testosterone. What else can we do? Let's put corn in everything. As a matter of fact, how do we get corn in everything? I know. Let's pay the farmers with massive subsidies to grow genetically modified corn that's genetically modified specifically to make a cow fat and reduce their metabolism. That's what it was made for. But it's also perfect because if we put it in food, that means people are going to get fat and the metabolism is going to go down and they become more docile. So let's get corn in everything. Corn syrup solids. Let's get rid of cane sugar and replace it with high fructose corn syrup. This is perfect because now everything from salad dressings to potato chips, Everything, mayonnaise to ketchup, everything's got high fructose corn syrup in it. Sodas, almost nothing has sugar in it anymore. Real cane sugar. They use high fructose corn syrup, which again makes you blow up like a balloon. It reduces your metabolism and makes you more docile. And people wonder, how come I have a hard time getting up in the morning? How come I have no energy in the afternoon? How come I don't have any motivation to go out at night? People are nothing but lazy sloths, and it's not their fault. They just don't have the physical energy. My God, when I grew up, my mother and father and all the neighbors, every night something was going on. My father would come home from work. He'd get a quick shower. Sometimes he wouldn't even shower, and he goes, "Come on, Mary, let's go bowling." And they'd go to the bowling league on Monday night, and then my father would go to the gun club, and he'd go shooting for matches on Tuesday night, and then on Wednesday night we had card games at the house, or they'd go over to the neighbors and play bridge all night until midnight. And then on Thursday night we had all the family over, and everybody's laughing and dancing until 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. Nobody was tired. Everyone was like filled with energy. All weekend long, you did stuff. You woke up, it's like, it's the weekend. Let's get out of the house. Let's go fishing. Let's go kite flying. Let's do this. Let's do that. People were like buzzing. They were bouncing off the walls. And heaven forbid there was a rainstorm and people had to stay in the house. It was like, oh my God, we got to get out of the house. We've been in here for 4 hours. Let's do something. I'm bouncing off. Why don't we clean all the walls? Let's do the energy that people had back then was just off the charts. Today, everyone's like, I'm so tired. I went to work. I sat in a desk all day and was in front of my computer. I'm so tired. So tired. Oh no, I'm so tired. Like, you wonder why you're so tired. Look at what you're eating. They want you that tired. Then you look at guys like Rupert Murdoch or Donald Trump, who's got so much freaking energy. Rupert was like 90-something years old. Look at these people, the elites. They're in their 90s. They're not sitting around going, I'm tired, so tired, so tired. No, they're bumping, jumping, they're going this and that. Why? Because they're not doing what you're doing. They're getting you to do it, but they're doing something different. They're staying away from the things that are suppressing you and making you docile, lethargic, and blow up like a balloon.
It's so true, actually, because even, I was born in 86, so I don't have this memory of what the 60s was like or the 70s. But even as I was a kid, I remember just having nonstop energy. And, we're out at 9, 10 o'clock riding bicycles and doing bonfires. And there was so much energy. I think a lot of it is because there was no smartphones. I think the smartphones are also a massive part of what has happened, the EMFs. And then you get into, chemtrails and the chemicals in the water. I mean, it's such an assault on humanity. But for someone that's watching this, and even my own, curiosities with this, because obviously I guess I'm someone that I think I've broken the mold in a lot of ways. I've started a few different companies. I've, always been, very independent in my thinking. Obviously I'm kind of bucking the trend by creating a podcast and avoiding the 401k and the, the 9 to 5, I just, from a young age, I was like, oh, there's no way I'm doing that. That's a prison. I don't want that. I don't want that lifestyle. I want complete independence, and I want to be able to kind of create a vision for my life and do my best to map that vision. And actually, I'll make a quick comment about that because I want to just kind of put out there for you is that, ever since I think when I was young, I read, Think and Grow Rich. I did a lot of reading on these different kinds of books and everything. And I do think that one of the most powerful things is the vision that we have of ourselves and the vision that we have of the future and what we perceive ourselves to be. I remember reading Psycho-Cybernetics at a young age and just thinking, gosh, this is mind-blowing stuff. Like what does my internal vision of myself look like, and how I'm reinforcing that, if I have a bad kind of view my own identity as negative, I'll keep reinforcing that because that's who I believe that I am. But one thing that I think is very sinister in this is that if you look and you ask the average person, what do you think the world looks like in 50 years? We don't have a lot of reference points for that outside of Hollywood, outside of the pop culture. But when we look in the future, what do we see? We see, well, is it Mad Max? Is it Hunger Games? Is it Blade Runner? There's no movies about this future where humanity rises up and we return to the virtues and we go back to living how we should live. All the movies and all the kind of ideas that we have about the future, they're pretty bleak. And I think that's actually part of this overall psychological operation too, is just to paint this picture for people repeatedly from a young age. Like I remember my favorite movies as a kid were, Terminator and Blade Runner and these movies that were very dystopian. But I think what it does is it creates an imprint in us, and we can't really imagine something outside of it. I think that's what they want us to kind of naturally walk into the Hunger Games, because we almost feel like, okay, that's just what the future is. Which I think is, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. And I have more questions, but actually I'll let you respond to that first before I jump ahead of myself.
Well, one of the things in the tool bucket is, what can we do to get people to feel helpless and hopeless? There's a difference. Helpless means I can't do anything right now, but I still might have hope for the future. But if I can get you to feel both helpless and hopeless, I control you, because you give up. Now, I have to suppress your hormones in order to make you feel hopeless and helpless, because otherwise you have too much energy. And especially guys, if you have testosterone, you'll never feel helpless. You'll feel like, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight. I mean, look, like or dislike Donald Trump, that's irrelevant. You got to respect that son of a gun when he got shot and he pushed the Secret Service away and jumped up. He didn't know if the shooter was still shooting. And he throws his hand in the air and he screams, fight, fight, fight. That tells you who this guy is. Like him or not, that's not the question. You got to respect the fighter in him. No matter what happens, he fights. He's got a ton of testosterone. I can tell you right now. The guy is not low on testosterone. He is driven and a fighter. So if you make somebody hopeless, now they have no dream. That's why under the Soviet Union, when I was talking to Gorbachev, we had a private plane, we were flying around Australia together, and we were talking about this at length. His wife was still alive at the time, Reza, but she was very ill. We had a doctor there as well. But I was talking through an interpreter because he didn't speak English, Mikhail. But he was saying in the Soviet Union, one of the things that was always a major factor of control was keeping the people feeling hopeless. And when you went into Behind the Iron Curtain, which I had done when it was still there on multiple occasions, the people had no hope. And that was how you control them. You just take their hope away. And then once Poland started getting hope, and you had perestroika and all the other issues there, solidarity and things like that, that's when the fall of the Soviet Union happened. So you have to take away hope. How do you do that? By painting a bleak picture of the future. You have no future. You have no future. You have no future. Which is why you mentioned the book by Maxwell Maltz, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics. The original version, it came out in 1959. Talks about self-image. He was the first person to use that phrase. The image you have of yourself. Do you see yourself as a winner or a loser? As a fighter or somebody who's a victim? How do you see yourself? It's critical for the elites to get you to see yourself as a victim. This is why there's one political party that wants you always to feel like a victim. And so it puts people in categories and saying, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim. Because if you see yourself as a victim, you will feel helpless and also make you feel more hopeless as well. So getting you victim mentality, very critical. And this is done through a multitude of ways. The media is completely controlled, and the internet as well. Platforms such as Rumble and the work that you're doing, and others who are speaking out and expressing opinions freely. It's unfortunately just a blip on the radar screen, because if you look at the amount of input the average person is getting from your show and others on Rumble and platforms such as that, where free speech is embraced and the free flow of opinions is embraced, that same person is getting 10 times more input from the mainstream programming. So it's still difficult to kind of overcome this. This is why the book like Psycho-Cybernetics, and by the way, I showed you this right before we started. I just got this yesterday. This is my brand new book called Your Wish is Your Command. It just came off the presses. It's brand new. It's my newest one. It's being called The Think and Grow Rich of Our Time. But that's why it's so critical to have a dream. In the Bible, Old Testament, it says, a man without a dream will perish. A man without a vision for the future and a vision for his own life is dead. Think about that. You have to have a dream. You have to have a vision. You have to believe in the future, and you have to believe in yourself. Those elites, they don't want you to have a vision that's positive. They don't want you to believe in yourself. They don't want you to have a positive self-image. They don't want you to have high self-esteem, because otherwise they can't control you. So if I reduce your vision of the future, if I make it a terrible future, you feel more helpless, and you feel more hopeless. You're easier to control.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. And so for people that are watching this and asking, okay, so what do I do? I know that you're someone that you understand coaching very, very well. You understand how to take someone from a despondent, hopeless place and help them find their way to a place where they have a vision, where they have excitement for the day, where they wake up ready to take on the challenges of the day to achieve a future that's worth fighting for. What are some very practical steps? What are some things that someone can take away from this interview and think, okay, I'm going to do a few of those things, and they feel a little spark that hopefully gets them going to the next stage?
There's one thing everyone has to do first, is remember this phrase: success is a decision away. So the first thing a person has to do, they're watching right now, is to make a decision that I'm going to improve myself. That's the decision. I'm going to wake up. Make that decision. All you have to do is make the decision. The universe, God, will give you the method, will give you the how, because there's a lot of them. But the first thing you have to do is make a decision. You know something? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to improve myself. Don't try to change that guy and that guy and that guy. Every time you point your finger at somebody else, there are 3 fingers pointed directly at you. Focus on yourself. Gandhi said it best: be the change you want to see in the world. Work on being a better you, but make the decision. Decision number 1, I am going to wake up. I am going to improve myself. And let the universe provide you the next book, the seminar you go to, the next lecture, the next podcast you watch. You'll start learning. This is a journey, okay? But don't be overwhelmed by the length of the journey. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Go as far as you can see. And when you get there, you'll see further. So it could be as simple as, you know something? I'm going to start drinking filtered water and get that fluoride out of my system. And I'm going to get a shower filter so I don't shower in fluoride and chlorinated water anymore. Okay, maybe somebody else, that's not the decision. Maybe somebody else is going to say, you know something? I'm taking 8 pharmaceutical drugs. Maybe I should talk to my doctor and wean off these. Don't stop taking drugs immediately. Do it under professional care, because some of them you just can't stop. You go maybe nuts or whatever. But maybe reduce the amount of pharmaceutical drugs you're taking. Maybe some of you will say, you know something? I'm going to eliminate high fructose corn syrup from my diet and anything with soy. Hey, that's super fun. You and the whole family go through the house, do like a treasure hunt, and saying, okay, whoever finds the most things with soy or anything to do with corn is going to win the prize. And have you and your family go through everything and look at the labels. And if it says soybean anything or soy anything, gets put off to the side. If it says corn, high fructose corn syrup solids, anything with corn, put it to the side. And anything with artificial sweeteners, aspartame, NutraSweet, sucralose, put it to the side. Unfortunately, most of your food is going to be off to the side. Have that. Maybe you'll say, that's what I'm going to do. And then say, well, we need ketchup. Okay, buy some organic ketchup. You're going to find out that it has real cane sugar in it. We need this, we need that. You're going to find a different brand. And all of a sudden, within a week, I can guarantee you, you're going to feel different. At 8:30 at night, you're not going to be tired. All of a sudden, your optimism, you're going to feel like, oh my God, I didn't realize that this crap was actually making me feel depressed. Yes. And then you're also going to realize, how come I'm not hungry anymore? How come I don't feel like just stuffing my face? I'm actually hungry. I'm full. How come I don't crave things? Because that stuff is designed to make you fat and make you eat like a pig. Sorry. But that's what it is. So maybe you do that. It's a very simple thing. Or maybe you think, you know something? I'm going to go for a walk, a 10-minute walk. I remember my friend Zig Ziglar, great motivational speaker, probably one of the best motivational speakers of all time. Although my other good friend, Les Brown, would disagree because Les and Zig are like number one and number two. But Zig Ziglar said when he started to exercise, he says, Kevin, the first day I made a decision, I was going to start jogging. And I says, wow, that's like a big jump. You know, you haven't even walked. Now you're going to start jogging. He goes, oh yeah, but I set my goal real simple. My first jog was going to be 1 block. And I live on a street where the blocks are really, really short. So I ran a block. It took me about a minute. Then I walked home. The next day, I walked the block and a mailbox. So he goes, I started nice and small. He goes, and I ran my block the first day. I thought I could do that. Then the next day I ran a block and a mailbox. I said, I'm stronger than I thought. And then I did 2 blocks. And I goes, I'm going to do two blocks every day for a week because I want to push myself too hard. So maybe you will start just going for a little bit of a walk and maybe you move your body. Or you think, you know something, I'm going to do 2 push-ups today. That's my goal. I'm going to do 2 push-ups every day for a week. 2. And some of you think, I can't do 1. Do it on your knees. Get on your knees and do the push-up. Think about it. Start someplace. But first, make the decision. The decision, I'm getting out of my trance. I am decided, I'm making a decision, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to improve myself starting today. Little by little, 1 step at a time. You eat an elephant, 1 bite at a time. Inch by inch, anything's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's hard.
It's really important advice, actually, which is good because I think it's very easy to overcomplicate this stuff. It's like, okay, well, here's my 7 steps to mastery, right? It's like, no, okay, you've already lost me. It's like, no, make the decision. As I look back at my own life, actually, I've had that experience over and over again. I hit that moment where it's like, okay, you make that decision. I think that probably one of the biggest pivoting points in my life was back in freshman year of college. And, I was in a liberal arts school, private art school, and seeing, all the different things happening and, the drug use and this. And I remember I had this really serious evening I spent journaling, and I came to this point where I said, God, I have to know, show me why it's so important to be good. Because I was seeing that all around me that a lot of people were choosing not to be good, even in like the easy kind of simple ways. But it was such a strong, it was like my soul crying out. Like it was such a strong intention that I want to understand why it's important to be good. And I want to choose a path of goodness. And that really, in a lot of ways, it really changed the entire trajectory of my life. And so, yeah, I think that's really, really important though, because I think that's it. You're right. Is just having that thought, having that initial intention, because there's so many people that don't even have that. They don't even have that. They're just, I remember reading a Tony Robbins book a long time ago. He talked about people stuck in the current of the river and they're just going wherever the river takes them. But, stopping and saying, wait, hold on. Where's this river going? Maybe I don't want to go where the river's going. If that's the case, where do I want to go? It's just that initial intention, I think, is so powerful. Well, Kevin, we're already, past an hour, which I going in this, I knew it'd go quickly, so we'll have to do this again. But as we're wrapping up, I want to make sure that I bring up your website, which I'll put the links in the description of the show. So KevinTrudeau.com. Your book is also on here as well. Is that correct? Is it under the store? Is that where people go?
That is correct. If it's not on there today, it'll be on there very soon.
Okay. Okay. So you'll have that on very soon. But can you just hold I'll full screen you again. Will you hold your book up again and kind of put
hold
that?
Up. This is the brand new book, Your Wish is Your Command, How to Manifest Your Desires. And it's brand new. It's based on an audio series I did over 25 years ago in the Swiss Alps. People paid $50,000 for 2 days. And I recorded it. I had the king of a country there, many billionaires there. Many of my brothers in the Brotherhood were there. And I taught people the techniques that I learned in the Brotherhood of how to manifest your goals, dreams, and desires. Again, it's kind of like Think and Grow Rich on steroids, or it's The Secret times 10. So it talks about things that aren't in any book on success or manifesting or the law of attraction. So I took that audio series, I transcribed it, and then I took 4 months and I edited it into this book. I added a lot of bonus chapter material. I filled in a lot of the blanks, and people who've read the manuscript saying, and they listened to the audios and they've manifested millions of dollars over the years. They said, oh my God, this is 10 times better than the audios. You fill in all the blanks, you answer all the questions, you clarify everything. It is just the blueprint for success. It's being called the success system that never fails. So I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be, it's going to help a lot of people who have struggled manifesting what they want. Maybe they tried to use the law of attraction, or they tried to use some of the techniques in some of the books and just aren't getting the results they want. When they read this, they're going to find out why, because they're going to see all the missing elements or how they misunderstood elements. And this gives you all the distinctions and fine-tune adjustments that will create the results you want.
And so screenshot the book if it's not in the website so far, right? But we'll so I'll have your website there. Also, I do want to bring up your Rumble channel. As a fellow podcaster and a fellow Rumbler, I'll put this link in the description as well. And it looks like, a lot, looking at the titles I see right here, that you're covering a lot of topics that I'd be interested in looking at, which is good. And so anyway, Kevin, as we're wrapping up, do you have any final thoughts to conclude with?
Well, the only thing I would like to make sure people grasp is a phrase that Zig Ziglar said years ago to me. He said, and he's a Christian, he was a born-again Christian, and he had a real Christian background, and I loved him for it. He said, you were designed for accomplishment. You were engineered for success, and you were endowed with the seeds of greatness. Always remember, you were born to win. Go for your dreams, and don't let anyone ever steal your dreams.
That's good. Those are great words to end on. Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for giving us your time today. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here. Good to meet you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that show. I've now got a very short interview with Natalie Dominguez, who's going to educate us on something that I didn't know existed until a few years ago, which is literally how people can steal your home without you even knowing it. So please enjoy this short interview. Natalie, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Glad to be here with you.
So your job, which is interesting, your kind of purpose is to educate people on something that I knew very little about, even a couple of years ago, which is how literally people's homes can be stolen without them even knowing it until it's too late, right? Which is home title theft. And so this is, I guess, we've got a couple different news articles that we're going to be diving into, which show real examples of this. It's not just some conspiracy or some fear tactic. And hey, make sure you're insuring this because this does happen. But before we look at those, just give us that 10,000 foot view. What is it? What is home title theft? How common is it? How does it happen? Just give us the kind of the elevator pitch to help us kind of make sure we're on the same page.
Absolutely. So, title fraud, title theft, it's known by a few different names. The FBI coined the term house stealing in the late 2000s. Used to be a crime that was done in a lot smaller of, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, my brain is not working right now. So the crime used to be done in I feel like a lot smaller quantities, because back in the day in the early 2000s, this was primarily a paper crime, right? And it still technically is, but with so many advancements in technology and AI, and then especially post-COVID with everything being done online, this crime has just skyrocketed. And essentially what it is it's criminals and scammers that are taking advantages of these kind of legal loopholes in our title filing system. So if I'm a criminal, I can walk into a county office and with a, 1 to 2 page document, depending on the municipality, I can file fraudulent paperwork and on paper claim ownership of someone's home. The public information is very easy to get because all of our property records are by statute public record. I can walk into any county office. If I have a general idea of where you live, I can walk in and probably find your home. I've done it with a few other of the, hosts and creators that we've worked with just to kind of show them how the process works. And even though they do have a good understanding of it, it still does tend to shock them every single time. So if I'm a criminal, I can go in, take advantage of that. Once the title documents have been filed, because the county's job is to record and not to authenticate, there's a little to no authentication practices that are happening at the county level. Even if they suspect it's fraud, by law, they still have to take it as long as it's filled out properly. So what this does is it gives the criminal or the scammer the ability to take your ownership on paper, on record with the county, and then go take out loans against your home or even sell the property behind your back. And most of the time you don't know about this until, I know some of the stories you have as examples, you don't know about it until you're getting an eviction notice or, pay back your loans now or we're going to foreclose on your house notices in the mail, which most people tend to think are scams anyway nowadays. So it's a very easy crime to commit and a very hard crime to unwind.
It's just incredible the depth that people descend to take advantage of people and rob people and targeting elderly people, especially that are relying on mail and they're easily susceptible to these kinds of scams. And so we've got a couple different cases to look at. I first want to look at what happened out in Arizona. Let me pull this up. We've got an article about this here. So predatory real estate scams. So stripped homes from owners in Arizona, their AG has come out and said. So I'll just read a little bit about this and I'll let you explain it. So this is from earlier, back in August of this year. So AG Chris Mays announced Monday her office is suing predatory entities who lured vulnerable homeowners into signing away ownership of their property. At a minimum, hundreds of people have been victimized by an alleged real estate scam that's at the center of a civil complaint being brought by the law enforcement agency. So the defendants in the lawsuit filed by her office are accused of presenting themselves as professionals who could help homeowners at risk of foreclosure. But the AG's office said the defendants were tricking these individuals into signing over the deeds of their homes. The lawsuit's being filed against Edward and Gretchen, along with more than 50 entities that they allegedly controlled. She described the allegations contained in the lawsuit as immoral and disgusting behavior, that these schemes involved soliciting homeowners and convincing them to transfer their deeds into a trust, but the deeds were actually being transferred into shell entities allegedly controlled by these alleged criminals. So this is kind of crazy. And this is something that I think also, if someone is, say, a few months behind on their mortgage payment and they're getting these notifications and they're already in a situation where they're feeling stressed, they're vulnerable. If someone shows up and says, hey, look, we specialize in helping you avoid foreclosure. We can, I'm sure they can present this really amazing case for how they can make sure they keep their home and just sign the dotted line. This is wild. So this is a prime example, right, of title theft, basically.
Yeah, personally, I think the most terrible part about this is that these people are physically going and making contact with these, elderly homeowners that are kind of in need of help. What's really unfortunate, because most of the time when this happens, there is no direct contact, right? It's a very subvert, under the table kind of thing that just happens and you don't find about it till way later. But in this specific case, they were making contact. And what is scary is if you were to go try to fight this in court, right? Let's say a criminal does this to you in your home and you can look at the paper and go, that's not my signature. We have a handwriting expert. It's still on you to prove that it's fraud, but it's a lot easier. Whereas these criminals are taking the extra step and getting the actual homeowners to actually sign over. So these are technically legitimate documents, but still forged because the intention was not presented properly, right? So it's so much harder to fight legally because these documents are technically legitimate, right? Like the homeowner did sign it. It is their signature. And it's very unfortunate, but it is title fraud because what they're doing is also taking that ownership and transferring it into these shell LLCs, these businesses that don't exist, or these people that don't exist, and then going out and taking these fraudulent loans. And I don't think any of the properties got sold, but I do know that a lot of the loans happened.
It's just crazy. So there's another one I'll bring up here, which is, I think, even more wild about this church. So let me pull up, make sure I have the right article here. So here we go. Let me just get rid of the ads on the page there. This is crazy. Like, so this person literally was stealing churches. Okay. And I had to read a little bit about this because it's almost too wild to comprehend. So the headline here is, I didn't understand how the law did not help us. Church theft highlights why Texas lawmakers acted on deed theft. It says the new Texas law makes real property theft a crime, extends the statute of limitations, and strengthens tools to return stolen property and secure restitution. So what it says here says, for Pastor Corey Maxey, the case wasn't just about fraud on paper. It was about losing his family's place of worship. His grandfather had founded the West Dallas Church. I didn't understand how the law did not help us when we had documentations of who I am and all that, he said. And the fraud, he said, was carried out by someone who called himself a pastor. So what happened here, he said, when we called the police out, the police told us we had a civil situation. So in 2017, Pastor Whitney Foster transferred ownership of the church from Maxey's congregation. He says it scattered my congregation, so it kind of broke us up. So cases like Maxey's helped push for a new law known as SB 16, which was recently passed. So it says, in the past, law enforcement thought this was purely evil, said the AG. So I'm going to just read a little more down at the bottom to explain what happened here. So basically, scrolling down here, they're describing how this process works. But basically, what happened with this guy is that this other person, like, literally took over his own church and then kind of finagled with the documents and literally moved his congregation into this guy's church. This guy tries to go back to his church with his congregation. Someone else is there. And he basically had used these, I guess, criminal activities to literally steal someone's church, which is just absolutely insane to think about.
Yeah. So I'm very familiar with this article. Part of my job, like you kind of said in the beginning, was I have to be very familiar with the news stories that are happening. One, because we also like to keep up with the different states and kind of what they're doing according to the law. So I'll touch on that in a moment. But what's very sad is this, I'm not going to say pastor, I'll say the criminal, right? The pastor that did the wrongdoing. So this criminal took advantage of the pastor and their congregation had moved out of the church temporarily for some renovations. And this is something that very often happens with title fraud and title theft, is criminals will target, vacant property, vacant land, homes that are being renovated. We've seen 2 in the past year alone that were literally families that were out for renovations, and they came back to bulldozed homes. 2 separate ones, much longer story, but they are higher targets because you aren't there, you're not being watchful and things like that. So this pastor had done the title fraud, the criminal had done the title fraud, moved the congregation in, and then when the original pastor had gone and they called the police, they had the police come over, tried to get them kicked out. But what happened was, because the criminal was the owner on record, the police basically said, well, this is what the county records are showing us. I know you have some records, but these are the legal on record records. We can't do anything about it. You need to go back to the county or get it seen before a judge and have them kicked out. Okay. So this is the biggest problem with title fraud, in my personal opinion. Yes, they passed a law that kind of, extended the statute of limitations because you don't find out about this right away and did things like that. But what's actually happening is it takes so long. Like, the only recourse you have as a homeowner, sorry, let me pause. The only recourse that you have as a homeowner is to hire a lawyer and get this seen before a judge. If I walk into a county office and I say, hey, fraud has been done on my property, this piece of paper is not me, it's not my signature, at the county, they're not going to go, oh, this wasn't you? Cool. That's not going to happen. They're going to say, sorry, it's a civil matter. You have to go hire a lawyer. You have to get it seen before a judge. Same thing that the police. We work with a lot of law enforcement. They say the same thing. When it comes to scams and things of that nature, it's not criminal, it's civil. So in this case, what is the saddest part of it is that even though this case brought up something for the state and they were able to go and push through some law changes, to this day, from our understanding, 8 years later, this pastor still does not have his church back because he did not have the funds to go through the legal process and the lengthy process it took to get the everything straightened out. But since then, this criminal pastor has done this to 3 total churches that they knew of and has been sentenced is currently in jail. I think 35 years is what he got. So that is where the logic I am completely lost, because how can someone go to jail for this crime, but the original pastor doesn't get the property back, right? And it's because they're 2 different processes. One is a criminal proceeding and one is technically a civil proceeding, and nothing is being done to change that, really.
It's absolutely insane. And so tell us a little bit more about Home Title Lock, right? So that's who you represent. And it's this. I've learned a lot through you, and I've done other interviews with other people of your team, and also like a guy who's he was a former title thief, which was interesting. So, the one thing that I'm seeing with this is that it's way more common than people would think, and it just happens. And a lot of times you don't know it's happened until it's too late. And it may not be too late to say get your house back, but it's too late from the perspective that you may not afford all of the legal fees, all the process it takes to actually go and disprove and prove basically that a criminal did this. Because as you mentioned, a lot of times the police, they just they go to the county and they look at the documents that are there, and those documents have already been basically forged or manipulated or replaced with the ones that say you don't own your home. And also the bank, right? So the person who then maybe even steals your identity and then steals your home and takes out, say, a $500,000 mortgage, say with JP Morgan Chase in your name, then you can't just go to the bank and say, hey, that wasn't me, because they're saying, no, you owe us $500,000, and so we're going to foreclose on your house. And so it just gets people in a complete mess. So walk us through what Home Title Lock does.
For sure. And before I do want to touch on something that you said that was very important. I constantly, because I do a lot of these interviews, I talk to the public a lot. I am on Facebook, y'all. Say hi. I do actually respond to people. It is me. It's not bots. But I do see a lot of people with a lot of very, very common misconceptions. My credit is frozen. Well, if they transfer out of your name, it's not in your name. It's not hitting your credit. It's on the bank. It's not on me if it's fraud. Nope. Sorry. I know that's a very thing to say in your head, but it's not. We have seen people in the news. Google it, right? We've seen people in the news lose their homes because the bottom line is a bank is going to have better lawyers than you do. A bank is going to know how to get their money back regardless of who they hurt. They don't care. They're not just going to, brush off a $200,000, $300,000 loan because someone took advantage of an 80-year-old. Sadly, it's the way that the world works, and it's horrible, but it's the way the world works. So that's why our company, Home Title Lock, does what we do. So we do offer protection for this crime in the sense of there are some other companies, I cannot name who they are, that claim to monitor your title or send you notifications. But what we do at Home Title Lock is so much more important, because we're not just monitoring alerts. Our $1 million triple lock protection is really protection for the homeowner. No one can stop the crime from happening. That has to happen at the government level. We can't stop it. The other companies I mentioned can't stop it. But what we can do is we can be there for the homeowner in the aftermath. So let's say hypothetically you are a victim of the crime. The first lock of our $1 million triple lock protection is going to 24/7 monitor your property. This is important. We monitor the property, not the person. Because if we're monitoring you, your social security number, whatever it is, again, they transfer the home out of your name, nothing's hitting your social security. Identity theft protection doesn't cover this. Credit monitoring doesn't cover this. So we monitor the property, not the person. 2, urgent alerts. The moment something is filed, it then has to go through this whole recording process in the back end. And this is something that a lot of people don't really understand either, is that it's not just you file something on paper and suddenly you get alerted. It has to go through, they have to index things, they have to file things, they have to scan it. And once it becomes electronically available in that database, we pick it up, we notify you. And this is anything that's filed on your home. Even if it is something that you are doing, we don't just kind of determine what's suspicious or not, because that's not effective. It's anything filed against your property. And then third, and most importantly, in my opinion, we're the only company that does this, is our $1 million restoration. So from start to finish, if you are the victim of this crime and you come to us and you say, hey, someone filed this on my house and it wasn't me, like, what do I do? Our team of restoration experts are immediately going to jump in and take over the process. The only thing that we really have you do that we're not allowed to do is file a police report if you haven't done so already. We do have to have that on the record, but then we take everything over. Depending on what state you're in, we will go through the process of finding representation, going through the court proceedings. We handle all of the legal fees. We do the court filing fees. We literally take everything away from the homeowner so that you don't have to do anything. And the reason this is important is we look at people like Pastor Maxey, who is 8 years later without his church back because he couldn't afford legal fees. That's why we do what we do. So that you as a homeowner, if you're, an 80-year-old that's being scammed, you're not on your own. It's not your money. It's not, your emotional time in your time management and all that stuff. We take it over. We do it for you. Our company was created because our CEO and founder went through something very personal himself, and that's how we found out about, this growing crime. And that's when Home Title Lock was made, so that people that are not getting the help from, the government, the people that are supposed to be kind of, helping us and protecting us, have some sort of recourse. So that's why we do what we do.
Makes perfect sense. So it's really, it's monitoring, it's flagging you every change that happens. Similar to, I've got these kind of, I won't name the exact company, but you'll get a notice if you're, someone's applied for a loan. And so maybe it's me. Maybe I went and I was going to finance a new lawnmower or something. I get a notification. So, I'm the best person to sort through, hey, did you just, take out a new loan against your house? It's like, no. Okay. So, but I think what's most important though, is you have that, if I'm correctly, you'll spend up to $1 million to basically make sure that situation is fixed. And so if something does happen, it slips through the cracks and you figure that out, your team, they have the attorneys, they know how the legal process works, they know the exact process it's going to take to make sure that can be resolved, and you're guaranteed up to $1 million in whatever it takes to make that happen, which seems to me like
absolutely
that's what really comes in.
Time-wise too. I mean, we've had cases where in our restoration, for our restoration customers, I mean, we've had cases where they knew who it was maybe a family member. I can't give specifics because of the cases, but one of them was a rogue lawyer that the family had worked with. In those cases, that makes it a little bit easier because we actually know who the person was. But we go through it with the family from start to finish. Sometimes they take, a month, and sometimes it's a year, and we're going to court for a year and we're getting stuff taken care of. But again, that's why we do what we do, to make sure that we're there for the homeowner when otherwise they'd be doing everything themselves. And we have a legal network across the U.S. because every municipality is also different. Every state has different rules and different laws and different ways to go about it. So we make sure that we are up to date with what goes on in every single state and every single county, so that we are prepped and ready to jump in, if and when needed. Makes perfect sense.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for your time today and educating us on this. I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that short but educational interview. Just to recap, the website you go to is HomeTitleLock.com/Seth. And if you use the promo code Seth, you're going to get a title history report for free and a free trial of their triple lock protection. So again, go to HomeTitleLock.com/Seth and start this process now, because as you can see, this is the real deal. Thank you.